So hot mic here. I just said I'm going to be really quick. How many of you heard me say that? I am going to be really quick, but I'm going to start by introducing myself. My name is Patty Wilson-Aden. I am the president and CEO of the Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance. And as I look across the room, I'm seeing very familiar faces, but there are participated in the workshop that preceded this. So one reason I'm going to be quick is because you've heard it before. But let's start off with the basics. Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance. You all know us, but I want to emphasize our mission. And our mission is that we lead, strengthen, and amplify the voices of the cultural community. And we do that to ignite creativity. We inspire people. And we believe that not only the Cultural Alliance, but all of you are essential to a healthy, vital Philadelphia region. So that's who we are. And I want to emphasize that when we talk about leading, strengthening, and amplifying the voices of the cultural community, we're really very aware of the plural voices because we understand that our sector is comprised of organizations that represent different fields. Our sector is comprised of organizations of different sizes, and our sector is comprised of organizations that might have staff of different capacity and different size. So this particular workshop series is really cognizant of the voices, the diversity of our cultural sector. We want to meet you where you are and provide services that are relevant to you. And that's why we're presenting this series today. And they gave me a clicker. I am not the best at that. Okay. So how do we do this? We do this through advocacy. You guys know this. You know that we're the ones that pull together the arts rally. We send you emails talking about the city budget. We send you emails about the state budget. We want to make sure that those elected officials, those key decision makers understand that we are vital to this thriving city and region that we all envision. Of course, we do the research because we want to back up the advocacy with the data. So you all are probably familiar with Culture Tech. You're probably familiar with Prosperity, our latest work. And this all pulled together. The stats and the numbers provide a profile that allow us to influence those key decision makers. We have creative youth development. And I like to think of creative youth development, our Bloomberg Arts Internship Program, as workforce development for young people. It is a pipeline. You know how they say you can't be it if you don't see it? We want to make sure that young people have equitable experiences through placements at cultural sites throughout the city. And by providing that experience, they understand that being within the creative community is more than just being, and I shouldn't say just, more than being an artist, more than being that person in front of the mic. You might be like all of you all, arts administrators. You might be that person who is in marketing. You might be that person who is a curator, but you are part of the cultural community, the cultural workforce. And it's important that our young people know that those professions are options for us. I can say that when I was in high school, I didn't know what a curator was. And if I didn't know what a curator was, how could I make a decision to perhaps follow that path? We want to expose young people to those options so that as they are making those decisions, perhaps they will decide on a career within the creative sector. And if they don't, they will still have the soft skills that we bring to them through that program. How do you show up on time? How do you interact in a workplace? Those are the things that we do in our Creative Youth Development Program. And of course, there's grant making. We are one of the Pennsylvania Council for the Arts regional partners. There are 13 partners across the state, and we are the partner for the Southeast region. We provide a portfolio of grants. One is the Creative Sector Flex Fund. Some of you might benefit from that. We also have the Creative Entrepreneur Accelerator Program. We want to make sure that as the state supports our creative economy here in Philadelphia, we are the connector, the coordinator, the pipeline, and we do that through our grants programs. So more at the Cultural Alliance. This is prosperity. I'm squinting because I'm trying to see what I'm supposed to say. Our prosperity report, again, gets to our commitment to providing data-rich information for you all to make decisions. It's big picture that also narrows down to the granular. Big picture. It is part of Americans for the Arts national profile of the economic impact for the arts. Drill it down, we're looking at regional impact, but we're also able to customize reports for each and every one of you. So if that's something of interest, if you want to make sure that as you're making your case statements to foundations, you have that data information, we can customize that for you. Our membership information sessions. You're learning a lot about the Cultural Alliance right now, but we want to make sure that you have that opportunity moving forward. So wherever you might be, there's some dates there. I'm real excited about October 15th. That is our art party, our annual meeting and arts party. It is a celebration of the creative economy. We've been talking a lot about the creative economy, about how we contribute $3.3 billion to our larger Philadelphia economy. We want to celebrate that, and we want to celebrate those individuals that embody our creative economy. So we're having these lunch and learn opportunities. I think it's a pretty cool opportunity to sort of network, find out who's doing what. You know, so often we're siloed. We work in our offices, we put our heads down, we do the work. This is your opportunity to look across the room and say, oh, I don't know this person. But it is also our opportunity to provide information to you. And we have today Ade Lawal. I have to admit, I've known Ade forever, at least what, 10 years or so? And Ade comes to us to provide information on HR experiences. We're also going to have another workshop with Nina Zucker. And I guess I'm dating myself because I've known Nina Zucker for years as well. Nina is a PR and communication specialist. She has been deeply engaged in the cultural community for a long, long time. And she's going to present a workshop on PR and marketing in our Lunch and Learn workshops. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ade, who's going to talk about Faces of Change. So Ade.
Thank you. Thank you for those who sat through the first session and decided to stay for the second one. I appreciate it. My name is Ade Lawal. I'm the owner of Express Employment Professionals. Express Employment Professionals is a staffing and recruiting firm that helps organizations find talent. We've been in Philadelphia since 1989. In the last 5 years or so, we've worked with about 650 different organizations, different sizes and industries. We work with a lot of nonprofits and arts organizations, and so I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. The second workshop is about understanding and managing generations in the workforce. The first one was about retention and recruitment strategies post-pandemic, which is very interesting because at first I didn't think the workshops were related. But as we talked through the first workshop and spent time talking about that, one of the takeaways is that the pandemic impacted people in the workforce in a way that it'll continue to for many years to come. And what the recurring themes you'll see is that for each generation, what impacts their attitude towards work and what they do at work is a result of the big events that happen during their lifetime. So one question I have for the group, and I want to address at the end of this workshop, is I want you to think about which generation gets impacted most by the pandemic and how. And I want to have that conversation after we talk about the multiple generations and managing them in the workforce. So the question at the end is, which generation is most impacted by the pandemic and how does it impact them in the workplace? Okay. So the objective here is to talk about the influence and characteristics of the different generations in the workforce. I think because we're in the arts, this is a good group to have this conversation with, because you probably have all the generations in the arts institutions, especially the much older group, and to some extent the new generation, which Generation Z, right? So you've got everything from the traditionalists, those who were around during the Great Depression, at least as patrons, if nothing else, right? Those are still most of the people that are your audience and your guests, and then all the way to Generation Z. So this talks about the different characteristics that influence the different generations in the workforce, and discussing each generation's unique contributions and area for growth. And we'll talk about how to motivate and retain these different generations. So what are the different generations? I think to some extent, we've all heard these terms. And in fact, many of you may have participated in conversations about this same topic. What makes a baby boomer unique versus a millennial, Generation X. Traditionalists, that word is not as common. I don't know that I've heard that as much as the baby boomer is probably the most popular one, if I had to guess. And then millennials, that's been a big thing here the last few years. But these are the categories of generations in the workforce. The traditionalists are those who were born before 1946. That's why I said many of those are probably at this point patrons as opposed to employees. And then the baby boomers are 46 to 1964, Generation X, 1965 to 78, millennials, 1979 to 1995, and Generation Z, 1996 to now. I guess there's a folks who graduated college in the last 5 years, something like that. Yep. So for the traditionalists, these were the big moments. The Great Depression, from 1929 to 1930. What stood out to me about the Great Depression, which I didn't realize until I was preparing for this, is that the gross domestic product decreased by 15% during the Great Depression. And if you compare that to what we thought was a big recession in 2008, GDP decreased by 1%. So just think about the impact that had on that generation. If we thought the recession in 2008 was bad and that decreased GDP by 1%, imagine a decrease in GDP of 15%. That just, that's an event that just, reverberates throughout someone's lifetime, right? Think about being in line for food and unemployment being at, I think it was 30%. I mean, ridiculous. We're struggling with finding talent now, and unemployment's 4%, but imagine unemployment at 30, 40, 50%. It's just crazy. So nevertheless, that's, in my opinion, the one big moment that impacted the generation the most. And then we had the Brown versus Board of Education ruling in 1954, which basically desegregated school systems. The integration of Major League Baseball and the introduction of mass-produced cars. So sounds like a long time ago. But these are the things that were life-defining moments that impacted that generation of traditionalists until today still reflects in their attitude towards work, their interactions with people, and what types of employees that they are. And I think understanding this helps us manage them better. Of course, the World War, again, sounds like a long time ago for most of us. So some of the characteristics at work, we talked about some of this actually in the earlier workshop. These are the folks that are most loyal to companies because the idea of getting a new job easily seemed like an impossible task when unemployment was 50%. When they got a job, they stayed there because they know how precious a job was based on what their experience was growing up, right? Good team players, conformity, less likely to initiate conflict at work, maybe seen as change resistant. Surprise, surprise. Does that resonate with anyone? Does it sound like this generation? Yes? Yeah, okay. They value stability, safety, security, consistency, and commitment. And I can understand why, given these big moments and events that took place during their lifetime. Some of their strengths on the job: stable, detail-oriented, thorough, loyal, hard work ethic. Some of their challenges: we talked about the fact that they're resistant to change, uncomfortable conflict, and reluctant to buck the system. 50% of male traditionalists are military veterans. That's the GI generation. So top-down management. So like to have order in the workplace and structure in terms of leadership. Okay. Is any of this new to anyone? Sounds familiar as we talk about it? So I won't spend too much time explaining. I'm just going to go through the slides rather quickly. How do you attract and retain these kind of folks? Setting clear job expectations, being fair and consistent, demonstrating personal touch, and providing flexible work arrangements. To me, that sounds like something that would be attractive to anybody, actually. So, but I guess it especially hits home with this generation. To them, this is the most valuable thing. So, okay. The next generation are the baby boomers. Big events that took place in their lifetime: the assassination of the president, civil rights movement, landing on the moon. And that's supposed to be a picture of Woodstock. I think a lot of the unrest, I think that the linkage between some of these events is a lot of the unrest during that time is what led to Woodstock in a sense as an outlet, right? A lot of the frustration people were feeling with the government and with the environment created this kind of huge outlet, which led to this festival that became more than it really should have. And I think it was the environment and the times that created that, I guess, the pent-up demand for something fun and free. So, yeah. Some characteristics of baby boomers: strong work ethic. Sounds like the same as the previous generation. Self-assured, competitive, goal-focused, resourceful, and team-oriented. Discipline. Potential strengths on the job: service-oriented, driven, work comes first, being a good team player, easily builds relationships. Potential challenges: not budget-minded, comfortable with conflict, and inclined to put process ahead of results. I think it's interesting how if you look at the moments and you look at the strengths and challenges, it becomes clear, right, as to why these are some strengths and why it's some of the challenges. So I think tying that together is really important. Like, it's almost, I guess, like being a therapist. What happened to you and why do you act the way you do? So, yeah, of course. I'm not totally sure, but as I think to some of the events that took place with the civil rights movement, with unrest, it's like what's what I'm looking for? Challenging authority, I guess, to some extent, right? And thinking back to discord in the environment and the economy, right? So how you spend money and being budget conscious, I think plays a part in that. And of course, we had gotten through the Great Depression, and it was a time of economic boom, I guess, to some extent. So I think, the economy was strong during that period of time. People were fighting for freedom. And so to some extent, maybe that's why that group may not be as budget conscious. Yeah. Yes, those were the free love movement. Yeah. Yes, a lot of wishes and dreams were taking place during that time. Yeah. So how to attract and retain them, taking a democratic approach, offering flexible work arrangements. Again, I think it sounds like flexible work arrangements is like the thing across generations. And we talked about that this morning as well, right? As one of the solutions to the challenges of retaining and attracting talent post-pandemic. So it sounds like regardless of what you do, the number one thing is to just make sure you offer us flexible work arrangements. Regardless of what generation you're dealing with or what problem you're dealing with, that seems to be the answer to everything, flexible. Asking for advice and taking notes to show you're listening, respecting and honoring their experience, exploring strategies to retain knowledge. Okay. The projection is 60 million boomers will be exiting the workforce by 2025, which is next year. Sounds strange. But I think the pandemic probably accelerated that a little bit. I think that's one of the reasons why unemployment is still as low as it is because there are a lot of baby boomers that are exiting the workforce. But 60 million, not a percentage, but 60 million people. So, yeah. Of course, I think that's offset by the fact that people are working longer now and not necessarily retiring as early as they used to, partly because, cost of living is not what it used to be. And the plan for Social Security is not materializing like people thought it would. People are not as prepared for retirement, given what.
There once was pension, but now there's not.
There you go. So, but yeah, that's the forecast. And that's, I can't believe 2025 is next year, but the prediction is 75% of the workforce will need to be retrained. Yeah. So this is just the departure of this generation in the workforce is going to make a big difference. I think companies that plan ahead and strategically implement programs will win the war for talent, which is essentially what Shinita was saying. Generation X, some of the big events that happened with Generation X, the explosion of the Challenger in 1986. Yeah, and yes, that is the Berlin Wall. The Rodney King beating. And has anyone ever heard the term latchkey kids? Okay, yeah, so that was that generation. The generation that the kids went home, took care of themselves after school. Yeah, because a lot of folks went back to work in the 70s and 80s. Okay, characteristics, independent. I guess if you've been taking care of yourself at home, well, while you were a kid in school, then you tend to be independent, problem solver, adaptable, thinking globally. Okay, because I guess the world opened up to some extent during that period of time. There were more global events. At least news traveled more globally then, or began to. Yep. Yep. Prefers work-life balance.
Midnight with that, Star Spangled Banner. We were talking about that when TV wasn't 24 hours.
Yeah. So, these are folks that are mostly born between 1966 and 1980, very tech savvy. They lived through the most profound economic changes since the Great Depression, rely heavily on technology in their experiences. Regularly change jobs. So, okay. Potential strengths: adaptable, independent, creative, not intimidated by authority, challenges, impatient, not natural relationship builders, and cynical. So this is a group that doesn't want to be micromanaged, that likes to be supported with work-life balance initiatives. When you delegate to them, they want you to describe outcomes, but leave the process up to them. This is what I want you to do, but don't tell me exactly how to do it. Trust their technological literacy. Mentor them and ask for opinions and talk with, not at them. Some of the types of messages that motivate this group is telling them to do it their way. Emphasizing that the technology that you have there and the lack of rules, the informality in the culture are things that appeal to this generation. This is also the generation that I guess we started doing away with dress codes because of, right? Okay, next group is the millennials, those born in between 1979 and 1995. 9/11, the shooting at Columbine, Facebook, cell phones, and the smartphone, right? And I guess there's a little bit of a recession due to 9/11. 87, yeah. This is the group that's most that's least bought in the term American dream. The millennials are living at home longer, delaying purchasing homes, not getting married as young. So to some extent, all these things impact them in the workplace. So this is generation that most buys into working for a cause. So that could be valuable in your organizations and how you retain and attract them, focusing on the whys and the mission behind the organization as opposed to like the job content. Potential strengths, collective action, optimism, tenacity, heroic spirit, tech savvy, challenges, need for structure and supervision, inexperience, particularly when handling difficult people and issues. How do you attract them? Providing growth opportunities, being transparent in communication, flexible work schedules, again, that just keeps coming up. And ensuring that they're connected to your company brand, which we talked about earlier as far as retention strategies post-pandemic, branding our organizations and making it clear as part of our retention and attraction strategy is what makes our organization different. And regardless of the size of the organization and your budget, you have a brand and you have something that's unique about you. You're articulating that to retain and attract employees. So that's something that we should be thinking about. Generation Z, 1996 until now. Yep. Yeah, so this is their thing. Tech savvy, social networking. This is the generation that basically has their phone open all day at work.
Unable to read the screen.
Oh, yes. Yep. Yep. As of now, they're only going to be 31% of working adults by 2025, but that's going to be changing. So today they're 9% of the workforce. This presentation might be a couple of years old. So by next year, they're expected to account for about a third of the workforce. For a dynamic, fast working environment, usually visually oriented, multitask across 5 screens on average. So is the mobile first and mobile only generation. they could probably work without a computer.
It's true.
Definitely not a desktop. Yeah. And they're the ultimate consumers of snack media,
What does that mean?
quick bites. Yep,
Yes.
yep, there you go. So I think it's because of this generation that every time something happens, we get notifications, right? So anything that happens, you don't have to wait till the news at 6 o'clock. You'll hear about it in 2 minutes from all the different forums. I got alerts from CNN, from this and that. So, yeah. How do you attract them and retain them? What's the most important employee benefit that you expect from your employer? And wellness programs. The 5 best practices of generationally friendly companies. They treat their employees like their customers, create options within the workforce, operate from a sophisticated management style, assume the best of people, and nourish retention. And I'll add flexibility, because that seems to have come up pretty much every generational slide.
What does operate from a sophisticated management style mean?
Have an excellent communication, rewards and recognition, okay? Given constant feedback, seeking and relying on employees' input, and being tactical as opposed to just talking big picture.
I'm only thinking of this from a parenting point of view, just so you know.
So back to the question that I'd asked originally, I think I only have 2 or 3 more slides left. Which generation do you guys think will be most impacted by the pandemic in the workplace, and how? Generation Z? Yeah, why do you think so? So a lot of consensus around Generation Z. Anyone have a different opinion about which generation might be impacted the most by the pandemic? Yeah, think about the generation that doesn't like change and not as adaptable to, that prefers structure. I mean, the things that become so informal, the balance of remote work versus in person. I would argue that the pandemic has probably had the most change in terms of work style during our lifetime. And so for those who, are used to waking up in the morning, getting their coffee, commuting to work, going back home, that's completely different. So what you're saying is that the Generation Z has a greater opportunity because of the changes. And I guess to some extent, when you say that, I think of like influencers on social media, and that's what they do. Like those jobs never really existed, right? And so because you're tech savvy and you're coming along in the time of remote work, then that kind of seems to create a perfect storm where basically you can be independent, and if you're a YouTuber at 10 years old, you can retire. Like, just things are unheard of, right? So I think that's maybe the point you're trying to make. Yeah. So, any other thoughts? So that's all I had as far as managing generations in the workforce. So, but I think this really ties into the conversation we're having earlier, because essentially, this is an event that's a generational event, and we just have to be conscious and be proactive about what we're doing as opposed to reacting. And I think that's the big takeaway: being aware and doing something about it as opposed to being reactive.